we collected a bunch of questions from our forum that we had online, and people asked questions, admissions questions, and those are the questions we're going to direct specifically to some of the speakers here today. So without further ado, I'd like to go down the panel and have all of our panelists introduce themselves, listing their names, listing their title, and the institution that they represent. So we'll start right here. Go ahead.
My name is Dr. Ron Berezniak, and I'm Assistant Dean for Academic Affairs at the Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine in Bradenton, Florida.
Hello, I'm Andria Garcia. I'm the Associate Director for Admissions at Florida International University's Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine in Miami, Florida.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mekbib Gemeda. I'm Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion at Eastern Virginia Medical School in Norfolk, Virginia.
I'm Evelyn Gopez. I am the Associate Dean for the School of Medicine's Inclusion and Outreach and the Associate Vice President for the Health Sciences Office for Inclusion at the University of Utah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Garland Jarmon. I am the Director of Admissions for the Creighton University School of Medicine in Omaha, Nebraska.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chenits Pettigrew. I'm the Assistant Dean for Student Affairs, Director of Diversity Programs at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jean Shelton. I'm the Director of Admission at Western Michigan University School of Medicine in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Stevenson, Assistant Dean for Admissions and Director of Diversity Programs at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, Missouri.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Richard Wiseman. I'm Associate Dean for Admissions at the University of Miami, the U, Miller School of Medicine, and a Professor of Pediatrics.
Thank you very much. So let's start please, a round of applause for all of them for being here, taking out the time to be here. Thank you. All right, so let's start with our first question then. So Dr. Berezniak, this is for you. When you say primary application packet that contains a below average MCAT score and a GPA based on your school's averages, what are you looking for in the rest of their application that might make you invite them to to your interview?
First of all, we're an osteopathic medical school. An osteopathic physician treats the entire patient. We look at the whole applicant. While we do consider MCAT and GPA as very, very important information, there's other information which we consider equally as important. Letters of recommendation. Your faculty members know you very well, and if they speak very highly of you, that carries a lot of weight. Your personal statement. What did you do in the past, and how has that affected your thoughts of going into medicine? And if that's put on paper in a very, very nice manner, that helps your application very much. And also your activities. If you're involved in clinical research, if you're involved in shadowing, if you're involved in Habitats for Humanity, if you're involved with working in a women's battered shelter, these things are very, very important because it shows that you have the desire and the I give a damn attitude about being a physician.
Thank you very much. So we'll have our next question. Dr. Pettigrew, this is for you. How does your medical school view undergraduate, international, clinical, and academic experiences?
Well, certainly medicine is a helping profession, and when we see students that have broad interests that cause them to put themselves in positions to assist patients and families across the globe, that has a significant impact on our perception of their commitment to medicine for the right reasons. Whether they be research or clinical experiences, those things are of significant value for us. Certainly we have a big focus on global health, and so we're also always looking for students who have had a global health experience in their development.
Thank you very much. So moving on to our third question. Mr. Gemeda, this is for you. If a student wants to take a gap year, what do you think is the best way to utilize the time period from when they've graduated from, let's say, undergraduate, and they're going into medical school?
A gap year, meaning after graduation, right?
Right.
So a gap year from graduation is actually a very good moment to continue doing, to improve on your application. And so you need to do something that would improve on that, meaning it can be medical related work, it can be research, it can be a global experience that we just discussed. But it has to be something that is related to where you want to go. So it could be service, it could be caring, it could be, so it has to touch on one of the aspects of your application that you want to work on. In any case, if you have something to improve on, that is an opportunity to improve as well. If you needed to take courses, if you need to do a post-bac program, if you have courses that you need to improve on, that is an opportunity that a gap year can provide you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to add to that? Anyone with a different perspective? All right, thank you. So we'll move on to our next question. This is for Ms. Shelton. So how do schools compare consistent involvement in a organization or a clinic versus someone who just goes abroad for about 2 weeks to do, participate in a clinic abroad for about 2 weeks? That's highly intensive.
Yeah, when we're reading through applications, we really look at everything. If you do have a great opportunity to go abroad for a couple weeks, that's great. However, we do want to see continued involvement, in your pre-health organization, in a volunteer group, those kinds of things. So continued involvement is really important. It's one thing to be a member of a group, but it's another thing to be a leader in that group and help to organize events, to take the reins and plan a big event or a fundraiser. So we like to see both, but we definitely like to see that continued involvement that really shows us commitment and drive. So if you do get that great 2-week experience, that's great, but make sure you're balancing it as well with continued experiences elsewhere.
Thank you. So moving on, Ms. Stevenson, this question is directed towards you. How do you view an application that presents a criminal record?
Honestly, there's a process that we have with the application where we will certainly take a long look at someone with a criminal record. And depending on what the circumstances are, I really can't give an example off the top of my head. You may not be eligible for consideration to our school. So we really take it on a case-by-case basis. We're going to read the explanation and make a determination. So there isn't one sort of general rule that applies. It's a case-by-case situation.
Thank you. Is there anybody on the panel that would like to add?
Yeah, Dr. Wiseman from the University of Miami. A criminal record is not a good thing to have, but you really have a full spectrum, anything from rape and murder that is going to give you a felony that will prevent you from being able to get a medical license. So that is an absolute exclusion. And then you get to the misdemeanors, and they also have their whole spectrum, because you could be driving 2 miles an hour in a speed limit in a school zone and end up with a misdemeanor offense, or you could have something much more severe than that, such as armed robbery or burglary. So certainly, if it is a minor traffic violation and that has given you a misdemeanor, that's not going to impact your ability to get into medical school. But certainly something that has criminal intent, or something where you've really shown a lapse of good judgment, that's going to be a problem.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else that would like to add?
I'd
Yes,
also
Sorry.
mention repetition. If you have one offense, it's one thing. If you have 4 or 5, it's another. So we want to see that you've truly learned if you do have an offense.
I know Dr. Berezniak
I
wanted
was going
to.
to say the same thing.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so moving on, Dr. Gopez, this is for you. Will a master's or a Ph.D. help a student out when they're applying to medical school? versus someone who's applying with just a bachelor's degree?
I think that you have an advantage if you have an extra degree or activity in your application. But overall, we first look at your GPA and your MCAT score. And we look at the letter of recommendation. So you have to choose, you have to pick who would write your letters for you. It has to be someone who is your professor who can attest to your academic activities and someone who has supervised you in your research and community service. So overall, I think you have an advantage, but the bottom line is we still look at your GPA and your MCAT scores.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anybody who would like to add?
I just wanted to mention, sometimes that could be also a problem if it's considered as if you are not sure where you're going. If you're doing a PhD and then if you don't have justification and show within your statement and the recommendations that you have legitimate reason why you are shifting, then it becomes shaky, for you.
And I would like to add that, regardless, I've been interviewing applicants for the past 8 to 10 years, and most of these applicants have very good application forms. But the bottom line is, if you make it to the interview process, it's how you conduct yourself during interview that counts most. You could have a GPA of 4.0, a very high MCAT score, but during your interview, if you mess it up, you're too arrogant, or you make a big mistake, then you're done. So if you come to my workshop this afternoon, we'll talk about how to conduct yourself during the interview process.
Thank you very much. So going off of that, let's say if a student hasn't done well in their undergraduate courses and they decide to do a post-bac, or they may decide to go ahead and get a master's and they do really well in their master's courses. So as medical school, admissions panel, is one better than the other, having a post-bac instead of a master's or PhD, or is a post-bac better? How do they level out? And this is for anybody who would like to respond.
I'll go first. The post-bac program, I think, is great because some people, they're having a change of life as far as transitioning their future. So if you go to a good post-bac program and you get good grades, I think it's great to apply to a medical school simply because you're bringing something that students right out of college do not have, and that's a little more maturity. You've been out in the workforce. And quite honestly, I think that's a very, very positive thing. As far as that versus a master's degree or a PhD, I think they're all going to bring, all three of these types of careers, as far as your academic careers, are going to bring a lot more maturity, and we welcome all those.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to add that there are also programs that are called medical masters. For example, at Eastern Virginia, there is a medical masters program which is rigorous, which gets you, if there is some courses that you want to improve on, it gets you through the program very well, and it's a good stepping stone. And you even get your courses the first year waived because they are actually the same courses as the medical school that you're taking. So there are programs out there like that which really prepare you if you have some gaps in your undergraduate academics.
I think it's important to also say that you need to be sure that this is what you're going to do. You want to have grades that, if they need to be radically different from what you were able to produce as an undergraduate, that they are. That similar productivity is not necessarily going to be very helpful. So once you make this decision and this transition, you need to be able to capture it in your personal statement in some way. You need to be sure your performance is representative of who you are at this point in time or what your full potential might have been. And I think it's very important that you have a very significant plan for your MCAT preparation during that period of time as well, so that you can couple those things together and have the kind of success in the process that you're looking for.
Very often with students who have taken a post-bac or a master's program, either to strengthen a strength that they might have or to correct a weakness, we see a failure to continue all of the good things that they were doing throughout college. And you have to remember that your clinical experiences, your community service, your research, your leadership should all continue through that gap year, through that post-bac year, through that master's, because what we want to see is a continuous pattern that you're interested and committed to the profession of medicine.
Go ahead.
At LECOM in our Erie campus, we have our own post-bac. And if you go to this post-bac program and you maintain a 3.0, you're automatically granted an interview for medical school, dental school, or pharmacy school. That's our Erie campus.
The last thing I just want to add to everything everyone said has been great. The other thing you want to look at when you're looking at post-bac programs, master's programs, so on and so forth is make sure they have a pre-health advisor, a great advising office for you. Because as we're saying, everything that you need to do, you need to have an advisor encouraging you to complete these different activities. Make sure that your grades are strong while you're going through the post-bac or the special masters. It can't be just you. Sometimes you need a little bit of assistance, so that's what your advisors are for. So check for the advising to make sure it's strong and that they have a history of enrolling students into pre-health schools that you're looking for.
Okay. And is there anybody else who would like to add? Feel free to do so. Okay. So we'll move on to our next question. Thank you so much for your responses. Mr. Jarmon, this question is for you. Is having research experience a crucial part into having admittance into medical school?
You know, every medical school is looking for a specific type of applicant for their school. Research is always a positive to have on your application. Many schools would like to see that because research is definitely a part of medicine. Some schools don't value it as much as others. For instance, at Creighton, it's not one of our top things that we look for because we're looking for more service-oriented students, more clinically oriented students, but research is always a positive because it is part of medicine. So if you have the opportunity to experience research, go through that process, we definitely encourage that so that you're a well-rounded applicant for the different schools that you may be applying for.
Yes, please go ahead.
And then the other issue with research is that research is generally considered as a lab, wet lab, pipette research, and that is not necessarily the case. There's a lot of very interesting research out there that touches on medicine, on social determinants, on public health, that would be very, very interesting, and that would actually give you a legs up if you come, because that is not quite often that we see those kind of students.
The approach that we take with research is kind of a competency-based, and what we're looking for is that the students have the ability to understand the scientific methodologies, understand research design, and most important, have the ability to critically review the literature, because as a physician, you're going to be constantly bombarded with new and innovative discoveries in the literature. And what we want you to be able to do is to be able to take a look at those findings and be able to critique and decide if it's going to be valuable or not in your practice. That's the skill we want, and it all depends on how many years or weeks or days it takes you to be able to acquire those skills.
I would also mention that if you do choose to list your clinical or research experience, if you choose to pursue it, just remember that if you're interviewed, there will be interviewers who will ask you about it, and they will be evaluating you and how well you can explain the process and what you got out of the experience. So know what you're talking about, and if you have any doubt about it, you might not want to mention it, because anything that you disclose on your application is pretty much fair game for the interviewer to ask. So certainly explore, but also be able to discuss it in a meaningful manner.
Was there anybody else? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I would only say that research for many institutions is also something where you are able to demonstrate creativity and your imagination in relationship to some of these critical clinical issues that are being reviewed. So it is an opportunity, as Lisa said, to do those things, but be sure that you can express your curiosity, understand what you did, and be able to present it in conversation.
I'd like to add that make sure that whatever you put in your application regarding your research work, that you know everything that you put in there, because the interviewer will know if you're just trying to put things there to impress the interviewer or not. And the other thing too is that know the clinical implications of your research. If it succeeds, what would happen after next? If it fails, what's the clinical implications?
It's also not a bad idea as you begin to look at the various medical schools that you want to apply to is to take a look at the area of interest that you have in research and see if there aren't going to be research preceptors for you at that school.
Okay, thank you very much. And if anybody else would like to add anything, please feel free to do so. Okay, so we'll move on to our next question. This is for Ms. Garcia. If a student has had a bad start in their undergraduate years, let's say freshman or sophomore year, and they show an upward trend afterwards, how much does that factor into the selection criteria?
As many have said before, it's a holistic review of your application. So obviously the academics is very important, but we're also looking for the academic potential. So if it is an upward trend, that would be more of a positive than someone who has perhaps then you started off rough and then got their things together and started improving.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add?
I can add something. You know, sometimes, you know, in your application, when there is a trend or a challenge that you overcome, it sometimes becomes, you know, very, very interesting. You become interesting as an applicant rather than, you know, somebody who is performing, even at the high level, you know, just everything is all the same. So if there is, you know, something that shows a pattern of, you know, you're overcoming things, you're, you know, overcoming challenges, becoming better every day, and you're showing it and you're demonstrating it, then that is a very important trend that we would like to look at. And I'm going to be doing the workshop this afternoon, which is called Telling Your Story. So that's some of the things that I would address in that if you would show up.
We actually love to see an increase, and it's very, very common for people to not do particularly well in their freshman year. It's a very big change from high school. As you're progressing through college, you're obviously getting older, you're becoming more mature, you're becoming more used to the stresses and pressures of school. What we want to see is that there's this gradual improvement toward excellence throughout your 4 years of college, so that if you're one of those folks that didn't do so great in freshman year, but have progressively gotten better, that's actually a very good plus to be able to show that you're maturing.
And I would argue, too, that this candidate may be a good person to look into an SMP or a post-bac program and continue on with that trend, depending on what happened to the GPA that freshman year and how many credits there are and repairing that. So I think this person may want to look into that option as well and continue on with that trend of excellence.
Yes.
I think one of the problems that students might have is developing a strategic plan to get into medical school. You just can't turn it around overnight. So I think what you need to do is start thinking strategically about how you want to work your way into medical school. Come to my workshop this afternoon, I'll tell you how. Wellman 119.
Thank you very much. So this question is for Dr. Wiseman. What are some important factors to consider when deciding which medical schools to apply to?
Well, when we talk to our students during our interview day, we talk about a concept of best fit. And best fit goes in both directions. It's being able to find a school that has your particular interests and a curriculum that's taught in a style that is your best approach for learning. From the school's perspective, we're looking for a student who is going to be successful, who's going to thrive and develop and go on to become an amazing physician and get a residency in the specialty and in the hospital that they're looking for. And that's how we really define best fit. The reality is that is what admissions is all about. We're kind of like matchmakers, looking at the population of students that are available and trying to determine if you would be a good and successful match. at our institution or perhaps someplace else would be better for you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody like to add?
I would like to add to that one. On an individual basis, if you are, which school would be best fit for you? Let us not forget our family, because we have had students who do not seem to have, I would say, their spouses are not happy where they are, and their kids are not happy, and it affects their education. So I think that in addition to what the doctor has said about, getting the best fit for your training, think about where your wife's going to be, your spouse is going to be, the school where your kids is going to be, the environment. And I think those are very important to picking the right institution for you.
I would also encourage you, when you're going to interview, sit back and look around. Stay a few minutes late, go a few minutes early, hang out in the union, hang out in the cafeteria. What do the students who are there look like? Are they having fun? Do they look happy? Those kinds of things. Can you see yourself as one of them? I often hear from students that I got that gut feeling that this is right for me. And you'll get that feeling, and don't ignore that feeling. Look for a school that's really going to support you as a person, but also you as a professional. So really look for, like they said, that best fit for you.
Okay, thank you very much. This question is for Mr. Gemeda, and this is from an electrical engineer. How are non-science background students treated when it comes to medical school admissions? So this could be, anyone who's a non-science major.
The requirements are very clear when it comes to medical school admissions. You have to have the required science courses, but beyond that, you can't come from other backgrounds. Actually, other backgrounds are very desirable because we're looking at diversity, right? And we define diversity in many different ways. One of the dimensions of diversity is students coming from various backgrounds, English majors and music majors and sociology majors who can come to the class and who can actually create an environment of learning, because we think students learn as much from each other as they learn from their faculty. So therefore, the students that come from other majors and backgrounds are very, very welcome I believe, to any school.
But you have to be ready during your interview. You're going to be asked this question. If you are a music major, why decide to go into medicine, and how would you tie up what you've learned in music with what you're going to be learning as a physician? So you have to be ready for those answers. Like, we've had applicants who are music majors, lawyers, engineers, fine arts major. And the question they ask is, why the switch, number one? And the second would be, how would you tie up what you've learned to medicine? So be better ready for that one.
Thank you. So the next question will be open to all of the panelists. How are medical schools addressing the impact of the high cost of medical education on specialty choice and securing providers for underserved populations? Yes, please go ahead.
At LEADCOM, our tuition is the second least expensive of any private school in the country. In addition to that, we have some required rotations that you have to do in underserved areas. Our dental school is designed specifically for underserved populations. So we're trying to work both at the cost saving for applicants as well as to helping out the underserved population.
Right, so anybody else, feel free to add.
University of Miami, I think one of the things that we look at is student debt. And one of the ways that we're able to counter that is with a very aggressive scholarship program. Taking a look at applicants that are going to add to the culture of the class through either their merit, their need, or their diversity. And we try to help offset the cost of medical school through a very aggressive scholarship program. This will allow you to kind of go forth not owing $250,000 when you graduate.
Would anybody else like to add?
I would just like to add that definitely the issue of debt is a major problem across the country. One of the ways that we try to address them, that in addition to some scholarship programs within, is really to advise students and to encourage them to apply for various scholarships and loan repayment programs that are out there. So those are, some of the ways that we should all think about to address this gap that there is between tuition and specialty choices.
One thing that we're doing, I think many med schools also are doing, is that we understand that we're expensive schools. Financial planning is something that we were talking about a lot at Creighton University. I know we're talking about across the nation. Advising and giving our students the education they need to manage their budgets when it comes down to living as a medical student. You'll have a certain amount of loans that you'll have to live off of, so on and so forth. How much do you need? And those are things that you can speak with the financial aid counselors at the different schools you'll be applying to, and they can help you with that. So on the front end, you're not taking out as many loans, and you're having less debt on the back end. So it's a kind of a balance. It's kind of a teamwork affair that we have between the schools trying to reduce their how much it costs and so on and so forth, find different programs for you, but also on your side too, having realistic expectations on what your life's going to be like as a medical student when it comes down to your finances, and making sure that you have that control throughout your 4 years.
I think that it's also very important to remember that there are some options available, and there are many programs through the United States Public Health Service, through the various branches in the military, that will usually offer you a year of free expenses and tuition for a year of service. So for some students it becomes an option, again, to be able to graduate without a huge amount of debt or without any debt.
I would encourage all of you, if you have time in your schedule, I know it's tough, but we're talking a lot about financial aid. We're a private medical school, so talking about financial aid, it's very helpful if you have an understanding of personal finance. What do these words mean? How will this impact me later? So if you have the wiggle room in your already really busy class schedules, fitting in a personal finance course is a great way to get a little bit ahead, and it might bust you out of your science classes a little bit as well. And I think that's a great way to prepare yourself for, okay, what is an interest rate? What is fixed? What is variable? All those kinds of things. And that'll help you better understand what you're signing on the dotted line later on.
So I think the point is you need to do your homework on your end, or we're trying to do some things on our end to make it more manageable for you. So when you go to school to interview and there's a student financial services session, you should go. If you have the opportunity to go to a second look weekend, you're accepted, and then you're given the opportunity to visit the school for a second time, there's almost always a session on financial aid. Make sure you attend that, and make sure you understand what's available to you at each school. For instance, at Washington University, we keep the tuition the same the entire 4 years that you're there, or that we keep that cost stable. We try to cap the cost that you have to borrow, but each school has their way of addressing this. So we have merit scholarships as well. So there's definitely some homework that you'll have to do on your end.
There's a lot of strategies that are in place to try to deal with this issue. But one of the other things that we often do is to try to make sure your advisors are as aware as they can be, and that this business of financial planning through the process and post the process is all part of the total picture that they're taking into account as you plan your process going forward. We don't want dollars to be a barrier to choice. We don't want you to make a choice because you feel that you'll make more money, although you want to do something else. So our goal is to make sure that we understand that finances are as much a part of you being successful as your academic effort or as your purpose for being in medical school and so forth. And we again try to minimize dollars being a barrier to choice or success.
Just one more thing to add, as was mentioned before, obviously also undergrad debt that you're coming into medical school with is something that you should be very aware of, because some of our students, obviously medical school is very expensive, but it's also the debt they're coming into that can also be a load.
Thank you very much. So the next question is also open to everybody on the panel. With the addition of Obamacare coming into effect next January, do you think that's going to detract some people from going into the medical field, from applying? Is this going to affect how many people you are enrolling next year?
Start that out.
I don't.
The Affordable Health Care Act is going to be a tremendous benefit to healthcare in the United States because it's going to be able to make medical care available to a large percentage of the population that previously did not have access. And I think anything that improves access to healthcare is going to be a tremendous benefit. I think it's going to also improve the utilization of resources where for populations that once didn't have the ability to go to a private physician, they'll now have that instead of running off to an emergency department. And I think all of these things are going to really increase the need for physicians in America, that are going to dramatically improve the health care in the United States so that we're not considered worldwide almost a second-tier healthcare agency because we don't have the same outreach and availability that other countries have. And I think it's going to bring us up into the current century. So I think it's going to be a tremendous thing that anybody in healthcare should truly be supporting.
I would just, the only thing I would add is, in anticipation of that, I think it's incumbent upon all of you to think, how you fit in that picture as you are, will be joining that workforce. So it is very important for you to think about how you can engage and in many ways understand what it is, to begin with, and see how you fit and how you can plan your career around that.
I would only say that we have an expectation that many more of you will want to be physicians as a result of the opportunities that the Affordable Care Act will present. And most medical schools are in a position to do what I call the Affordable Care Act in real time. We're all trying to make sure that your education and the experience that you're having is reflective of the environment that you'll be going to, even as that environment continues to change moment to moment, as you see from the experience we're having even as we speak. But we're not expecting any drop-off in enrollment as a result of the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
With this new bill, will there be pros and cons for a physician?
I think that it depends upon where the physician is practicing. So if you are in an academic setting, you'll be seeing more patients, basically with the same pay, I would say, depending upon your rank. And if you are a private practitioner, I don't know how much you can bill for this new set of patients versus your own private patients. So.
Okay.
I think time will tell because, first off, all 50 states have an opportunity to approach the Affordable Health Care Act a little bit different. And that means that each state is going to have a little bit different rates for Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement. And that's largely going to determine if it's going to be a major plus for physicians or just a situation where you're going to have to see more patients for less money, which is not very different from the situation that we're in right now. I do think that this is going to move things forward in a very positive direction, very optimistic.
And another thing that I would like to add is that because there's going to be much more focus on outcome, right? That is already there. So there will be an advantage in terms of working in an environment where outcome is going to guide your practice, and so there's going to be much more focus on that.
Thank you very much. I'd like to remind everybody there's 10 minutes left of the panel, and with that in mind, I'd just like to open this up to all of the panelists. Is there anything you would like to add about, how to prepare for medical school, how they can strengthen their application? Any words of advisement?
I'd like to add something about the scholarships. So let's say, for example, that you have exhausted everything about the scholarships offered by that institution. What I have learned from my job this year is that the chambers of commerce, the consulate, they do have scholarships. So I was meeting with the Consul of Mexico a few weeks ago, and I wasn't aware of this until they mentioned it to us, that they do have scholarships for students, regardless of what degree you're going into. It's just that not everyone have heard about it. I had a meeting with an individual who's responsible for scholarships for Native Americans. And even if you're not a Native American, if they still have the money, they'll give it to you if you apply for the scholarship. So I would say that if your financial institution or your advisor has given you all the resources and you still need extra money, ask them, do you know anyone that I could call at, this Chamber of Commerce? And you might just get lucky and you might have an extra money in your pocket for them.
Anybody else? Any last words?
Well, I'd like to thank you guys all for coming out. You guys are doing the right thing by getting out here. I know in the break room this morning, this is some of our favorite conferences. This is my favorite. I think this is my 5th year. I love coming to this conference. You guys are getting a wonderful opportunity to get to talk to an entire lawn full of admissions folks, of people who are making decisions. So you're definitely doing the right things. This is a good opportunity for you to figure out, okay, where should I be applying? I know I'm going to apply to 10, 12, 15 schools, whatever it may be. Where? And get that opportunity to chat ahead of time. So I really want to thank you and the organizers for putting together such a great event that we get to talk to you guys. This is why we do what we do, is getting to work with students and helping students to find their fit. So you're definitely doing the right thing. Ask questions today. Don't leave with questions sitting in the back of your brain. If you have it, the guy next to you does too. So ask your questions. No question is too small. So enjoy your time, and we hope to see you later out at the fair.
So I'd like to echo those sentiments. Thank you so much for inviting us here. And I want to just bring up the point about finding the right fit again. We mentioned it earlier. I mean, you're going to do your homework, you're going to go to the AAMC website and do your research and keep up with deadlines, but once you get to a school and you have the chance to interview, spend as much time as you can talking to the students. I know our students love to chat and tell you everything they know about the school and what it's like to live in St. Louis, Cardinals, and the cost of living, and they do musicals, and they're very involved in community health. So get a feel and see if it's the right fit for you. I know when I interview applicants, a lot of times they will tell me, I just feel so comfortable here, and I think it's a really good match. And that's the way ultimately that you want to feel as well.
I would also add, if you're, when you're visiting schools, you have an opportunity to contact students and then earlier and spend the night, so you kind of cut on the cost. They can house you in many cases, and you really get to see the environment very well then. You spend time with them and see how they live, and even, sometimes you attend a class and see how it is there. So try to contact students all the time. That is a very important advice.
One of the other things is that when you're working with your pre-med advisor, the pre-med advisor will also be able to tell you about other students who have gone on from your institution to that particular medical school. And that's a wonderful person to be in contact with because they already share a lot of things in common with you, having graduated from the same school, taken a lot of the same courses, and they will also act as almost a facilitator if in fact you decide to go to that school, because you'll now know somebody there that has come from your area of the world. And they might be able to help you to find your apartment, and again, to make that transition all that much easier. So again, there's lots of ways to learn about your future school. The one thing that you want to do is to make sure that you're using one of those ways. Don't decide upon the school that you're going to go to by randomly applying to some schools and then selecting the one that was the least expensive, because invariably you're going to end up at perhaps the school that wasn't the best fit for you. Do your homework in advance is really what we're telling you.
I think there's 4 things you have to look at. You have to look at the tuition of the school. You have to look at the curriculum. If the curriculum is not your learning style, move on. I think that's very, very important. The geography, where is the school located? And finally, how well does the school do on boards? If the school barely has a real poor pass rate on national boards, I don't think you want to go there. I mean, LECOM at Bradenton, 3 of the last 4 years, we have 100% pass rate on the boards. Think about these 4 things, because that's very, very important.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like everybody to give them a round of applause. Great answers. And thank you so much, panelists, for taking our time to be here. So we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll get started with our second admissions panel. So if you need to go to the bathroom, here's your chance. Thank you so much.